It's Locked On Hornets, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and we're going to talk about the Hornets' loss to the LA Clippers and then give you a little update on the win against the Lakers once more. We'll talk about all of that today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, local experts on a daily podcast format. We appreciate you hopping on with us. Follow us on Twitter, Walker Mail, Doug Branson, LOH, Locked On Hornets. Also go to YouTube. The subscribers, I keep mentioning it because it keeps happening. They keep rising and rising at a pretty fast pace. How far are we out, Doug, from 1,000? I know we're getting close.
We're 80 away. So if you want to be one of the elite 80, then go ahead and subscribe to Locked On Hornets. Get us to 1,000.
It's
Big
funny
milestone.
to see how many people wanted to wait until $9.99 and then be the cause for us to paint our faces. There are a couple of comments out there that they wanted to be the person that did it, but you can still contribute by going to YouTube right now. 980, 1,000, 940, it all counts the same.
Well, here's what I would suggest. Go ahead and subscribe with your main account. Create another Gmail. They're free. And then use that account as the account that you're going to lurk and try to be the 1,000th. I understand the sentiment. I understand wanting to feel special, but go ahead and subscribe with the main account, then do a secondary account. That's how you do it.
There you go. All right, let's talk about this Clippers loss, Doug. We already did the live game recap with David joining us, and it felt like a down game despite actually beating the Lakers, but they were not at full health. LeBron James didn't play. Anthony Davis didn't play. Russell Westbrook showed up, and he showed up big time, specifically in the second half. Still, Hornets able to take care of business despite it getting really close. Not the case against the Clippers. They actually won the first quarter 25-24, so they didn't have one of these bad starts that were really prevalent at the beginning of the season, and then it was the second half where it went all downhill. They got outscored every single quarter outside of the first, and the biggest point differential, it took place in the fourth. Charlotte only scored 14 altogether in the last period, and the LA Clippers scored 31. I thought defensively, LA brought it to Charlotte, and nobody else really could hit shots at a high frequency other than LaMelo Ball, who was pretty good, certainly offensively. What were some of the notes that you took away from this Clippers game?
I mean, I thought it was one of the more embarrassing efforts, especially in that second half. Look, you're playing a Clippers team that, like the Lakers, are depleted when it comes to talent. No Paul George, no Kawhi Leonard. They're also missing Nick Batum, who has been playing very well for the Clippers this season. And so the Clippers were playing like the team that had nothing to lose, and the Hornets were playing like a team that didn't care whether they won or lost. I mean, I think one of the sort of defining plays of this game was the final seconds of the third quarter when P.J. Washington had the ball in his hands at about half court and had plenty of time to get a shot up. He wasn't being defended all that closely and just decided to hold on to the ball. I mean, and the Hornets needed points. I just thought that this was a game that they were just not mentally prepared for. I understand the Hornets are dealing with some injuries themselves, dealing with some absences, but that's not an excuse. We've seen this Hornets team miss players and give valiant efforts win or lose. This was not one of those nights.
Yeah, if you wanted to compare both of these rosters, both teams had their issues. I mean, the Clippers, they're without Paul George, they're without Kawhi Leonard, and so two of their biggest stars, it should leave the Clippers pretty vulnerable, and their record, even though they actually had a pretty good road trip on this little stint they just went on, you would think that the Charlotte Hornets can get one over at home, where they've played pretty well this year. They're 14-8. They were 14-7 heading into that game. Just didn't take place. Either way, on paper, Doug, the Hornets roster looks better when you even consider all of the guys that were out in this one. How much depth does Charlotte really have? When you have Gordon Hayward, Kelly Oubre, Jalen McDaniels all down, those are three important rotation pieces. But at the same time, you had a lot of the people that still get a lot of minutes in the starting lineup. The only guy you're really missing is Gordon. You're losing your sixth man of the year for sure. Like, that's big. But you also had PJ Washington coming off of the bench. James Bouknight had been playing well to that point. You thought maybe he could help you out a little bit. And then Ish Smith went from being awesome against the Lakers to not being very awesome at all, scoring a big old goose egg in 15 minutes against the Clips. And then defensively, weren't very good in this one. And then I think the Clips really bought in with the defensive effort, and down low, it was just a chore for the Hornets to do anything once they got in the paint. I think that's all. I mean, clearly size, which is always going to be a problem, but also you can just see that the Clippers wanted to bat that basketball away from the paint as much as possible, and they made sure they damn did it.
Well, yeah, and the Hornets are most lethal offensively when they can touch the paint first and then kick out to three. They don't have a lot of shooters who can really get their own shots and knock them down consistently. They need to be facilitated too. And so when teams can lock down the paint, it really has become a problem for the Hornets. I counted it up, Walker. The Hornets are 7-11 against the top 10 defenses in the NBA, and it's something I've been shouting about a lot. I think, when you get down to playoff time and every single team you play is going to play like a top 10 defense, I think the Hornets are going to struggle because this offense, I think, and I understand the loss, the people that are out. I mean, I think Gordon Hayward's important to the offense. I think Kelly Oubre is extremely important to the offense. So I understand that you're missing those players. Jalen McDaniels, too, has been a threat offensively for this team. But I think this offense is clampable. And I don't think the defense can necessarily step up consistently enough to win a 7-game playoff series. Bouknight has done some amazing things offensively. Impressed me with how his ability to get to the rim, take contact for his size. It's been great. But defensively, he's just not ready. And this game was
not
Exhibit A.
Mm-mm.
No, he was getting not consistently, not at all in this game. I mean, he was getting scorched defensively, blown by, not paying attention, getting back cut. And James Bouknight will get there, but you're seeing why he hasn't been able to really crack the rotation consistently. I'm not sure why the other rookie isn't playing. I'm not sure why JT Thor isn't playing. It seems like why go with Ish Smith in this game when you need size? I mean, I don't know what that says about Nick Richards. I don't know what that says about JT Thor. But I just don't understand why you don't go Thor a little bit in this game to give it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they just thought offensively they needed to find different ways to score, and he didn't. And Ish Smith can get you going sometimes, and for sure defensively, I understand your point. Just trying to be in the mind of one James Borrego, maybe that's what he was thinking, but it didn't help. In fact, there wasn't a whole lot offensively going right.
Yeah, I mean, they are severely limited by a lot. Look, first of all, let's just get this out of the way. I mean, the Hornets cannot really stand to miss 3 to 4 rotation players. That is not what this team is. LaMelo, Terry, Miles, they are not the level of star or superstar that can yet. I think LaMelo could get to this place, but not in a place yet where you can say, all right, we're missing 3-4 players. I'm going to put you. We've seen LeBron do this to teams. We've seen Giannis do this to teams. The superstars can say, all right, we're missing 3 or 4 major rotation pieces. Just give me the ball. Let me go do what I do. I'll win us this game. Hornets don't have those players. So they're always going to be severely limited. The only way you win these type of games against teams that are also severely limited is if you play hard. And they did.
That's true. I want to talk more about the bench coming up in just a moment, but let's talk about Built Bar. It's the new year, so that means you have New Year's resolutions, and if yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in that plan. It makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good. It tastes maybe even better than a candy bar. It's low in calories, it's low in sugar, it's low in carbs, but it's high in protein and it's high in fiber. So go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. We'll talk about the bench. I want to make a point about PJ Washington's offense as well. We'll talk about that coming up on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
You are listening to the Locked On Hornets podcast.
And Doug, don't you have an Eldon Campbell stuffed animal type thing?
Yes, I do. I got it at the last regular season home game that they had before they left for New Orleans.
I love me some Eldon Campbell, but is that the guy?
They were clearing everything out of the house because it was whatever they gave to the fans that night, they didn't have to take with them to New Orleans.
Get more Hornets analysis on LockedOnHornets.com.
I'd like to apologize, Walker. I feel like I was a little fired up in that segment. I got a little excited, a little frustrated, and I just want to apologize for my tone.
Okay. No, I think your tone was okay. I did not take any offense to what your tone was. You were frustrated with this one more so. You didn't feel like the Hornets bought in against the Clippers. Maybe
they were look. It was an afternoon game. It was an afternoon tip.
That matters, by the way. And even the players, they kind of acknowledge it. Chad Iskey, he kind of mentioned it too at halftime. Said it's an early game, so we're going to try to have to bring the energy when he talked with Asher Shamity.
You're playing a West Coast team.
I know.
It's like 7 in the morning for those guys.
I'm only telling you it matters because they told us it matters. Chad Iskey is the one that said it kind of matters, and I understand that way of thinking. But you're right. Yeah, it certainly did in this one. Another thing is, it's the second straight game where the bench has been outplayed. And so if you look at the Clippers, big time plus minus numbers in favor of the Clippers in this one. And then against the Lakers, we all knew, Austin Reeves comes in 16 points, Kent Bazemore 13 points, Melo 19, plus minuses of really almost all in the double digits, and it wasn't working for Charlotte's bench. PJ Washington 3 of 8 against the Lakers, 3 of 14 against the Clippers. He kind of got out of that slump a little bit, and then he went right back down to not shooting so well, even if the season totals aren't all that bad. Yeah, I do want to talk about PJ's offense just for a moment here, because one of the things that I bought into for him improving offensively coming in from last year to this was that the 2-point percentage would not be as bad. And it's true, it's not as bad, but man, it's still not very good. And I think that is the lack of size, where if you're going to constantly play PJ at small ball 5, where he's still good and he still helps this team more than he hurts him, you just can't really expect him to score down low. And he was looking for his shot a lot against the Clips. My brother was watching the game, and he said, why is PJ looking for his shot so much so? Like, he had a lot of attempts in this game against the Clippers.
Wrong team to do that again.
Yeah. And so I thought that was interesting, right? Like, they had experimented with Miles, and Miles, it took a while, but started to be able to do some things with the basketball. They experimented with PJ. PJ didn't have even the same kind of improvement Miles did, and you're seeing, I thought this was a game against the Clips where you saw that, shoot threes, make smart reads, play very good defense, and have a killer small ball lineup. That's what you're getting from PJ. Putting it off the deck or putting it on the deck, not really his game, and not really looking for his shot is something I want him to do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of PJ Washington this season as a 2-point player at all. Really, I mean, I think of PJ, if PJ Washington is going to be a threat offensively, it's going to be because teams are leaving him wide open from 3 and he's knocking them down. And he just hasn't been knocking them down very consistently, and that's why, it's so clear that he's struggling with his offense in general and offensive efficiency. The thing, too, is like Miles Bridges, and Zach Lowe pointed this out in his 10 Things article that he just released. Miles Bridges has benefited a lot, and so has LaMelo, from the way that the Hornets decide to run pick and roll with those two players. It gets them moving downhill in a way that really disadvantages the defense. And you saw LaMelo just tear the Clippers apart inside. I mean, when he gets his head down, he's just able to score so effectively because he's so crafty. And, he might not be the most explosive driver, but he's crafty. And Miles, same thing. I mean, he's just physical when he drives. But running those two in pick and roll has really benefited the team. And PJ doesn't get that same kind of action from the Hornets. The plays that they run from him are not quite the same, and so
it's got to be pick and pop if you're rolling with him, right? Like, you can get some lobs. I think he may have had an alley-oop against either the Lakers or the Clippers, but he had a pretty nice dunk, and maybe that was kind of in transition as well. But point taken. Miles is a lot more physical. He can finish at the rim a lot better than what PJ can, who you just kind of want to pop.
Yeah, and I thought, PJ's not the only guy that needs to get his 3 back. I mean, LaMelo wasn't very good from 3 in this one. The Hornets had wide open looks in this game. Now the Clippers were locking them down inside and preventing some offense being manufactured there. But the Hornets were pushing the pace. They were trying to play their game. They didn't knock down open shots, and they let their defense suffer as a result.
Yeah, it sure did. So bad loss, especially when you get blown out by 25 points. At first it was just going to be a loss that could have been bad because you wanted to show the world again that you could do it, 2 times against LA. But really, it was a bad loss because they just played really
At
poorly,
home,
right?
I
In
mean,
the
at
fourth
home.
quarter,
We keep saying, oh, they got a lot of home games. They've been playing well at home, and then they throw this one away, and it's an extreme disappointment.
Yeah, for sure. All right, for listeners who served in or worked for the United States Marine Corps, have family or friends you might have, I wanted to notify you of an available resource. From 1953 to 1987, personnel assigned to Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune were potentially exposed to contaminated drinking water. The Marine Corps has since partnered with health agencies to conduct scientific studies to assess impacts from these potential exposures, and they are working to keep those Marines, their families, and civilian employees informed with updates and resources available to them. If you were someone may have been at Camp Lejeune during those years, please consider registering with the Camp Lejeune Historic Drinking Water Notification Database. You can learn more and register at www.marines.mil/clwater. That's www.marines.mil/clwater. Let's continue to talk about the Hornets' letdown of a weekend, what's on the horizon, a little bit of a rest before their next game against the Celtics on Wednesday. That's still to come. The last segment, Locked on Hornets podcast.
This is Locked on Hornets.
All right, so we've got Al, or we've got the question how. Like, how did Miles do that? Can you help us end this debate with so much and unbelievable amount on the line?
Doug, I respected the nth degree, but Walker, I'm telling you, every single person who saw that reacted that way. Some of us just are tighter than others, and I just had to release this from my body.
It's time for more of the Locked on Hornets podcast.
Not all that unlike Eric Collins, who just needed to release energy from his body because of a sweet Miles Bridges dunk. Doug Branson needs to release a stat that he found. He's sitting on it. I'm sure it's going to be tasty. What kind of hot stat do you have for us today, Doug?
I don't know if it's hot, but it is very illuminating.
Okay.
The warm light of facts that really show you some of the problems that the Hornets
that doesn't
have
have the same ring as hot to it. Illuminating because of its factual evidence. Yeah, that maybe
no,
just
this
be a
stat
hot
is
stat.
like this stat is like a warm hug of factual information. All right, let me throw it up on the screen here. So this is from Twitter. The tweeter is Tom Bassine at TV Bassine on Twitter. This is updated team performance by quarter. Who owns each quarter? This is net rating by quarter, and the source is NBA.com/stats. And you can see the Charlotte Hornets. I don't know if you can see. I might have to zoom in here for the YouTube. But that's okay. The Charlotte Hornets are minus 6.6 in the first quarter. So this is net rating, minus 0.1 in the second quarter, 6.0 positive net rating in the third quarter, and then a 2.0 net rating in the fourth quarter. So, Walker, this shows us a lot of what we've been seeing this season. Just awful starts from the team that have been difficult for them to overcome.
Yeah, and I think I was saying this in the first segment. A lot of that was early on, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think they've dug themselves in quite the holes here as frequently as they did like early on, where they didn't win their first quarter until Golden State on ESPN. I think it was like the 9th game of the season, and then they proceeded to then get destroyed by Golden State in that one. At least they got revenge and beat them later on. But the fourth quarter is most fascinating to me, even with the best net rating being that third quarter for Charlotte, because this has been a team that the last 2 years have been extremely good in the clutch. At the beginning of the season, it wasn't really the case. They weren't the worst team in the NBA, but they were like top 15, top 17, right? They were kind of middle of the road. They started to figure that out a little bit. They beat Philadelphia. They beat Boston, a couple of close contests. They beat the Lakers the other night, even though it wasn't great coaching or playing at the end of the fourth quarter. They still were able to hold on. But they're not quite to the level that they were the last couple of years, and it's why you see the point differential consistently be in the negatives, yet they're higher than what in the standings than what their point differential should normally indicate for other teams.
Well, let's look at some teams that have good point differentials in the first quarter. Okay, it's Cleveland, it's Dallas, Denver's okay. They're pretty good. Memphis is good. Miami is great. Milwaukee is great. The Phoenix Suns are great. And you can see, too, teams that don't have a severe letdown really throughout the game are your elite teams in the NBA. It's the Phoenixes, it's the Utahs, it's Memphis, it's Miami. Cleveland has a problem closing, but they're so damn good in the first quarter. And that's all. I think that all speaks to your starting lineup. Can you both defend and play offense? The Hornets struggle to defend because they don't have a defensive rim protector anchor underneath. And it also speaks to maturity. Can you come out with the right attitude? Can you start games well? It's so like the discrepancy between these numbers in the first quarter. When the Hornets win, they play well. They play significantly well in the first quarter. When they lose, they play significantly poorly. Like the discrepancy is huge. And they've really have to get it figured out. I mean, I think this really highlights for me the reason why, despite missing players, despite some issues with maturity, that I think the lineup issue, the fact that that you've got Mason Plumlee there and you need something better, I think is the number one issue, and they have to address it at the trade deadline.
Any problem? Any fear about this continuing to be a problem with Miles Bridges getting a second tech in as many games?
Well, I think it is a problem. Yeah. I mean, in this one, it wasn't as, kind of time and situation devastating as it was against the Lakers. This one, they were a little bit further out. But I think just the general frustration that you're seeing from Miles and from PJ, I think is something they really have to figure out. Something doesn't seem quite right with this team right now, and I'm not certain what it is, but I just don't. They're not having a ton of fun out there, even when they're winning games against the Lakers. So, I think it's, David Walker says like they need the All-Star break, and that may be the case.
That's always said about this team every single year.
I know it's a little bit of a cliche, but I mean something seems funky right now. And maybe they do need some time off.
Yeah, I will say the 6-point plus for them net rating when you talk about the third quarter. I mean, it all kind of makes sense, right? The eye test does match up with what we're seeing in this stat, and you do see Charlotte start to dig themselves out. It's honestly really indicative of what we saw in the fourth on opening night against Indiana. That game was the blueprint to what was going to take place the rest of the season. Bad first quarter, come out, guns a-blazing third, find a way to hold on and eventually make the right plays in the fourth. That's what you get the rest of the year.
Well, here's my take on this. I'd much rather be the Cleveland Cavaliers. I would much rather have a closing problem than a starting problem.
Yeah.
Because I think a closing problem is tactical. It's who the coach is throwing out there at the end of games, and it's really going to change game to game. And it's a lot about clutch shooting, but I think it's fixable. Your starters not being right and not coming out with the right mentality, that's going to be a little bit more difficult to fix, and the Hornets have a tough challenge ahead of them for sure to turn those numbers around.
One seems more predicated on luck a little bit too.
Well,
so, yeah.
I mentioned, just real quickly, the teams that are elite at starting games. Let me also mention the teams that the Hornets find themselves in the same company as, and I think this is illuminating too. So the Charlotte Hornets at minus 6.6. They join Detroit at minus 14, Houston at minus 9. The Clippers don't start games well. They're at minus 5.3. The Pelicans, the Knicks, the Thunder, the Magic. Are you noticing a trend?
Yes, I am.
As I use the same inflection in my voice to illustrate that all of these teams are either struggling or are bottom dwellers, and the Hornets are in that same company, and they shouldn't be.
It's a weird team, right? Because also they're good in the third quarter, and I saw one of the more ridiculous numbers on that sheet was Golden State had a plus 17.
Well, it's great because first half it's positive 4.6 and 1.2, so it's like they let you hang around, and then they just annihilate you in the third quarter.
Yeah, turn on the switch, baby. That's what happens with Charlotte. They're talented enough to do that. All right, thanks for making Locked On Hornets Hornets, your first listen every day. Make sure you join us tomorrow. We'll continue to talk about the Hornets again because we have a couple of days before we get this next game against the Celtics. That's going to take place on Wednesday, tip at 7:30. Make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms. Check us out on YouTube. Have a great day, and we'll be back with you tomorrow.